the Experience Darden podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, I'm excited to share my recent conversation with Andrew Yowell. Andrew is a second-year student in our full-time MBA class of 2025, and he is also a future scholar. I recently connected with Andrew to talk more about his background, his decision to pursue an MBA, what led him to Darden, how he spent his first-year summer, and so much more. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. And as always, if this conversation is helpful for you, please like this episode and subscribe to Experience Darden so you never miss an update. And remember, you can always check the episode description for links to Darden blogs, social channels, and more. And now, without further ado, here's my conversation with Andrew Yowell. Andrew, welcome to the podcast.
Brett, thanks for having me. Really excited.
It's great to talk with you. How's everything going? How are you doing today?
It's going well. Just got done with first coffee. We were actually hosting this year and stuffed with muffins and croissants and have a refill on my coffee. So I'm ready for the podcast.
Excellent. What was the first coffee about?
Yeah, we were actually hosting this year or this week. It was about the Darden Sustainability Conference, trying to promote the event that we have going on this Friday. Had a couple professors come and endorse us and talk a little bit about the importance of sustainability in business and how Darden is valuing that and in the way that we live and learn. Had a great turnout. About 150 people gathered in the PepsiCo forum to hear about sustainability. It was great.
Are you expecting a big crowd for the sustainability conference?
We hope so. We have quite a few signups already and making our final pushes now.
I know there's a lot of planning that goes into those kind of events. Tell us a little bit more about the event and what you can look forward to.
Yeah, it's quite a lift. So fortunately, we are working with another organization at Darden, Net Impact. It's another student-led organization, as well as many of the UVA organizations, Batten Institute and the Institute for Business and Society. We've been planning this really since we took leadership back in March of this year. So it's about a 7-month planning cycle, but it should be really great. We have 15 speakers coming in from really around the world. We'll be zooming in from India, California, quite a few that will be able to be here in person from the Northern Virginia and Richmond area, or Charlottesville as well. And also excited to welcome back a few alumni for the events that are going to be speaking. So great opportunity for students to learn about the industry or learn about how sustainability can impact their industry, as well as a good networking opportunity.
Is there a particular theme? Obviously, sustainability, very broad topic. Is there a particular angle the conference takes?
Yeah, I think it serves two purposes. One is very educational, just to give people an intro to sustainability and how it impacts business. Our theme for this year that we're honing in on is really managing demand. How do you manage demand from investors and customers, demand on the electricity grid from AI and data centers? It's really challenging to do that. And we have goals set across the government and many organizations for decarbonizing and how are we going to meet that demand while also still meeting our customer and business demands. So it's very existential and should be a really great conversation with some of the speakers we have.
Yeah, it also feels like with the changing administration might be slightly different viewpoints on some of these policies and approaches.
Certainly, it's a timely opportunity to have the conference here 1 week after the election. And we do have quite a few government officials coming as well from the EPA, Department of Energy, who are really, really close to the source and close to that situation. So it should be a great time to get their perspectives.
Yeah, that sounds like a great conference. Well, good luck. I know, again, so much work goes into that. And I think it's a great example of all that students do here at Darden to kind of drive extracurricular programming and to make so many things happen outside of the classroom. That's a little bit different, I think, than at some schools.
Yeah, Brett, you're totally right. Darden prides itself in its student-led initiatives, and I think it is a great example of that. Although we have support, but it really is student-run, and it's a great opportunity to step up into leadership during your second year by planning one of these big events.
All right, Andrew. Well, let's talk a little bit more about you. Thank you for the indulging all my questions about the sustainability conference, and good luck this Friday. Tell us a bit more about you and your background.
Yeah, thanks, Brett. So I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia, born and raised. I went to undergrad at Georgia Tech and studied engineering. I spent a few years after graduating in the consulting space, focused on procurement. Particularly for me, I was working on energy procurement. So essentially, how do companies like Walmart or McDonald's or your local grocery store buy energy, electricity, natural gas, and renewables? Really enjoyed it. It was quite the time to be working in the energy space during 2020, and then 21 with the Texas winter storm, and 22 with the Russia-Ukraine conflict. So really, really fascinating time to be working in that space. And I really developed a passion for energy. As I was working there, I started to reminisce on some of my college internship experience at investment banks and really missed some of the finance side of things, and felt a desire to go back into the finance space, work with the big numbers, talk about IRRs and NPVs a little bit more. And I think that posed me or primed me for the opportunity to go get a true education in finance and business at Darden. And that's led me to where I am today. I've continued to serve that passion at Darden, as I mentioned earlier, on the Energy Club board. And this past summer, I had worked for a company here in Charlottesville on their project finance team, developing wind, solar, and battery projects. So I think it's a great space for MBAs to be, just given the nature of how large these projects are and the number of stakeholders you have. But yeah, that's a little bit of my professional background. On the personal side of things, I am a big golfer. I've spent many, many hours on the driving range and on the golf course. It's something that my family and I hold very near and dear. And Charlottesville has been a great opportunity to scratch that itch. There's quite a few really good golf courses close to Darden here, and I've enjoyed doing that.
What are your favorite places to play in Charlottesville?
Oh man, I would say Birdwood is really high up there, which is the University of Virginia golf course. They have a fantastic student rate and student membership for Darden that applies to the Darden student body. So I'd say on any given day, you probably have 10 or 15 classmates out on the golf course, and that is really fun because it is a social sport. Personally, I also joined another club called Spring Creek that's out toward Richmond, maybe 20 minutes down the road, and get to go out there as often as I can. But a lot of great challenge in the golf game around here, and it's also nice to be able to play year round.
Yeah, get outside, good break from business school, do something, be out in nature, just decompress a little bit. There's a lot going on when you're navigating a BA program. Nice to do something a little bit different.
Exactly. It's a great opportunity to decompress and also form new relationships.
Yeah, so you originally applied to Darden through the Future Year Scholars Program. Do you want to talk a little bit more about the Future Year program?
Yeah, that's right, Brett. To give a little background on Future Year, so essentially it's a deferred admission program. So I applied to Darden during my senior year of undergrad, and then had the option to come and matriculate or start at Darden anywhere between 2 and 4 years after graduation. So it was my choice on whether or not I wanted to stay at my job for 2, 3, 4, or maybe have multiple jobs after graduating from my undergrad degree. And I really valued that optionality. I think that you have so many unknowns when you're coming out of graduation from undergrad or from any school, and you really being able to pull as many levers as possible to give you flexibility in how you want your career and academic journey to look was something I really valued. I'd had Darden on my list of schools for quite some time. Have some family in the area. Grandfather actually went to UVA for undergrad, and I was really interested in UVA for undergrad as well, although I didn't quite make the cut back then. I think that being able to have my redemption and come spend some time in Charlottesville has been really, really nice. And the program's flexibility was very valuable. And I'd say on the admissions process overall, it's very similar to a full-time admissions process as you would go through if you were already 3 or 4 years out of school. You do interviews, applications, essays, all of that. But after you're accepted, you stay engaged with the program the entire time. I had multiple dinners in Atlanta with admissions faculty and other students, and you really get integrated into the Darden community earlier on, which makes me feel like I've been at Darden for 6 years now, but it's only been a short year and a half.
So it sounds like you knew that you wanted to pursue an MBA way back in college. How did you come to that realization?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd studied engineering in college, and it was industrial engineering, which is sort of like business engineering, thinking about business systems and processes. But I don't think it gave me a real structured approach or framework to how to approach business problems. It gave me a lot of technical resources, the ability to code and do calculus and all of that. But I don't think it gave me as much of the industry knowledge and the approach that you need to be a leader in business. So coming back and getting a formal education on that was really valuable. And not to mention meeting people in the industry or whatever business that you are going into will pay dividends for a very long time. So I'm fortunate to be able to, call the Darden network and the alumni network my home and have access to that group of people.
How did you figure out when was the right time for you to go back to school, so to speak? You mentioned you have the flexibility with the Future Year Scholars Program after 2, 3, 4 years to matriculate at Darden. How'd you figure out the when question?
Yeah, that could be the answer to that could be so many things. It could be where you are in the business, what's happening at the company, whether or not you think they're going to continue to grow, where you're positioned in the company, and also what your personal outcomes are. If you're planning on having a family at some point or getting married, that could change when the right time to go back and pursue an MBA is. For me personally, I think it was more driven on the work side of things. I had spent 3 years working in consulting, had 1 or 2 promotions during that cycle, and importantly, had at least a year managing teams under my belt. But the runway forward was likely long and maybe not as much reward as I was looking for in that period of time. It could have been in that same role for another 2 or 3 years until kind of the next step up into leadership. And I think I wasn't willing to wait that long to make that jump. And I figured that being able to get the MBA education would still put me into that next level while also paying what I mentioned earlier, those dividends of having a new network to work with and a new education and skill set to be able to lever in my future career. So for me, it really was more career driven, and I'm fortunate to have a little more flexibility in where I live and being able to take a few years off from making a traditional salary. But at the same time, I think so many of those factors need to play a role in that decision process, and it really is a unique and individual choice on when you go. My recommendation for anyone considering the Future Year program would be to make sure that you have some management experience before starting at Darden. The case method is demanding from a leadership perspective. You need to be able to reflect on some of your prior experience in order to be valuable to your fellow classmates. And that's really how you're evaluated is how much value do you bring to the classroom? So having that from your work experience is pretty important.
That kind of segues very sort of neatly into the next question. So you come to Darden, obviously a very intentional choice to go back to school. When you did come to Darden, what were the first couple months like as you were kind of getting settled in?
Oh, a hurricane of fun, excitement, and learning. I really enjoyed the first few weeks, and I've enjoyed every week since. But when you first get here, there's such a great energy around grounds at Darden. Everyone's ambitious and willing to help and friendly and so genuine as well. Everyone wants to understand who you are, where you're coming from, meet your family and friends. And I really enjoyed that. But on the academic side of things, it is very different than going to, for me, engineering or really any other type of learning experience, because the case method is very different. It's not a lecture. You aren't learning in the classroom. You're learning before the classroom and applying that while you're there. Being able to prepare with your learning team, prepare with your fellow students before you take the test being the classroom experience, it is a really different dynamic than what I was used to coming from engineering, where you take notes in the class and are very focused on the formulas on the board. Here, you're focused on what have I already learned and how is it going to make this discussion more interesting and valuable for the problem we're trying to solve. But overall, Darden does a really good job at providing the support systems and structures that we need as students to integrate into that life. For example, recruitment during your first year doesn't start until really October. So you have almost 2 months until companies are seeking you for interviews, which gives you a good amount of time to settle both academically and culturally.
I appreciate the point about recruiting because I think that's always on people's minds, and it feels like a lot of the employer engagement stuff is starting earlier and earlier. There's even activities that sometimes people engage with prior to the start of school. What section were you, Andrew?
Section C, the section of champions.
All right. What was your favorite thing about being in section C?
Oh, I think every section can probably say this, but I do feel really close with the people in my section after spending the first 3 quarters in every class with the same 60 people. You really start to understand how they work. You understand who's going to chime in and say something when the professor proposes a question in a certain way. I feel like I know them really well. We also have done very well in Darden Cup. Last year, we were the Darden Cup champions, and one of my favorite experiences was Darden Cup, and we can touch on that later. But I really enjoyed being able to get to know those people really well, and I'll consider many of them lifelong friends.
Tell everybody what Darden Cup is. We talk about it occasionally here on the podcast, but some of our listeners, this may be their first time hearing about Darden Cup.
Yeah, Darden Cup is a year-long competition between the 5 sections. So everyone in their section competes for their team, their section team in the events. And the events can span everything from soccer to a trivia to talent show to cricket or bowling. There's a really wide variety of events that are hosted by the student association throughout the year. And essentially, it works like the Hogwarts competition. I'm not a huge Harry Potter fan myself, but I know that all the different schools compete with one another in the different events, and it works very similar to that. Then at the end of the year, the team with the most points from their participation in competition gets the Darden Cup, which is a massive, maybe 2.5 foot tall trophy. It's maybe 20 pounds, and it's a great pride to be able to bring that into your second year as the Darden Cup champion section.
Do you have a favorite competition, favorite part of Darden Cup?
Yeah, I like trivia. I'm a big Jeopardy fan, so trivia was one of my favorites. I was able to participate with one of my professors as well. He was on my trivia team. I've really enjoyed that and formed a good relationship with him through that. Personally, I'm a big bowling fan as well. So I competed for Section C in bowling last year, and this was soon after I had adopted an Apple Watch as well. So this is my anecdote, but I had adopted the Apple Watch, and I stepped up for bowling first round, and I get a notification on my watch that I had an increased heart rate level because I was so nervous that I had 100 or 200 people watching me bowl. And you'd never think bowling is a high heart rate activity, but it got it for me.
That's a lot of people to be watching you bowl, and people don't bowl with great frequency, so you just never know what's going to happen.
Neither do I. Neither do I. But we have started to go on Tuesday nights. We have Tuesday night bowling club that our section does, and it serves somewhat as our practice, but don't tell the other sections I said that.
I don't think golf's made it into the Darden Cup just yet.
No, not yet. They did have a brief section during the relay race that was golf based, but no full event. That said, the Darden Golf Club does put on quite a few events throughout the year that are appealing to both competitive golfers as well as beginners, and I think they do a great job of growing the game through that.
Nice. And you just thought the PGA and USGA were the only organizations growing the game. Not so much. The Darden Golf Club is on the case.
There you go.
How did your career goals evolve over the course of your first year? Did you basically end up doing what you thought you were going to do? Did that change at all?
Yeah, that's a great question. Part of the reason why I wanted to come back was to do a bit of a reevaluation of my career. I think my plan A coming into Darden was to use my prior energy experience and just tack on the finance side of it and blend those together to do an energy finance role, similar to what I did this past summer at Apex. And it's still a really exciting time to be in energy, and I'm still focused on achieving those goals and working in the energy finance space. But at the same time, Darden gives you access to so many different career paths and so many different networks that you can learn about so much across many industries. One that I've found really interesting as of late is this entrepreneurship through acquisition. Essentially, after you graduate from your MBA program, you buy a small business. You're not buying a Fortune 500 company. You buy a local mom and pop auto shop or a coffee shop, and you institute yourself as the owner and CEO of that company and run it using the principles that you've learned over your last 2 years in business school. And ideally, this is helping to transfer wealth to the individuals that had established these businesses, while also introducing new thought and rigor into a business that maybe just hasn't been a priority for the prior owners. So I find that really interesting as well, because it gives you autonomy to be your own boss while also giving you the opportunity to use so much of what you learn in business school and really never have a same day at work ever when you're the CEO of a company. So that's an attractive space for me right now. And I'm still evaluating a couple different options there. But yeah, it's really fun to be able to look at all of the careers and be presented with this vast menu of career options when you come to Darden. And then also having professors and friends to sort of gut check you on whether or not that's the right career for you. And I've appreciated that a lot during my time here.
I appreciate your note about just how many options there are and the opportunity to explore. I think that's a big part about an MBA program. I think oftentimes candidates feel a certain amount of pressure to have everything figured out when they show up. And the consistent advice that I've heard from students here on this podcast as we've talked about this is, yeah, good to have a goal, but kind of hold it loosely, recognizing that you're going to take classes, you're going to meet people. There are oftentimes things that you think you want to do that you then subsequently learn maybe it's not exactly what you thought it was going to be, and being able to pivot and to be flexible in that way is important. The other thing that people always note, and I'm curious about your thoughts on this, is that you really have 2 years and then your entire life as well to kind of think about what you want to do. It's not just the first few months, all the work you're doing to try to find internship. I think a lot of people tend to focus a lot on that internship process and then forget that you also have a whole second year, and then not to mention your career after you leave Darden.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Brett. It can be stressful sometimes just how many options you do have. But I couldn't agree more on holding your goals loosely, because you never know what's going to come about from this experience. Yes, Darden is very well equipped to provide career options in investment banking and consulting and general management. There's no doubt about that. And there will be many success stories from my class and all the classes following in those careers. But at the same time, it is also equipped for things like energy or entrepreneurship or startups. So it's really interesting to see how people's ideas change throughout the course of their time at Darden. And on the timeline perspective, you're absolutely correct. The first few months feels like everyone's locking up their internships that will turn into full-time jobs, and then they just have the fun 18 months ahead of them before they graduate. But at the same time, it does provide you a lot of opportunity for exploration. And I think using that time, even if you are one of the people that has an internship that will likely transition into a full-time role, still keeping your blinders down and still looking around to osmosize all of the information and all of the opportunities, because you never know when a friend might come to you 5 years down the road and say, "Hey, I've got a great idea. I think we need to do this."
Why do you think ETA is becoming so popular? I've had a number of podcast conversations, both on Experience Darden as well as the Executive Ed podcast, where people have mentioned entrepreneurship through acquisition and how this has really captured their interest in terms of thinking about what's next for them.
Yeah, I think it's multifaceted. A lot of it has to do with the autonomy in the work. You set your own calendar and agenda as the CEO of a company, and you have full discretion over the strategy of that company that you acquire. Another aspect is the financial reward as well. You pay yourself a salary, a CEO salary, and then you also retain ownership in a company that you're able to grow. I think some people are looking to, really integrate into the business and find a way to produce stable earnings for that company going forward. And others might be looking for a quick exit into something like private equity or to a larger strategic firm. It's a growing industry. Many MBAs are picking up this scent and trying to see how they can break into it. And it's a really, really creative industry. There are many ways you can structure these types of acquisitions in the small business market, and you can make that match your needs personally as well. So I think it's something that is risky, but at the same time, something that you have a lot of control over. And I think for an MBA, that's something that's attractive.
Well, I'm curious, Andrew. We sort of talking about the sustainability conference, but I'm curious what else has taken your time and attention here in your second year. Elective classes, obviously, you're picking your classes at this point. There's clubs, organizations. Tell us a little bit more about what's been filling your plate.
Yeah, I really enjoy the class picking. I think you hit the nail on the head there. Your first year core is interesting. It's very fun. I probably wouldn't have taken two marketing classes if you had given me the option to, but I found a lot of excitement in those classes. They were challenging to me and gave me a new perspective on many different things across business. But as I've started to pick my own classes, I've been able to focus on what's important to me. For me, I've really honed in on finance and economics. And as you get into those second year classes, they're a little bit less skill based in terms of, can you calculate the cost of capital for an institution? And a little bit more about, what do you do with the cost of capital for an institution? And the professors do a great job of structuring these classes to really tell a story, as well as bringing in industry experts to the classroom. So I've really enjoyed being able to hear how potentially Darden alumni, but many professionals are applying these core principles that we learned in first year to the actual real world. I've had a great time doing that. I find myself overreading cases sometimes, just looking at all of the exhibits and all of the optional readings I can. But I really do enjoy that and think that's been one of the most exciting aspects of Darden.
You bid on electives, obviously, so some electives may be higher priorities for students than others. Were there particular electives that you said, gosh, I got to make sure I'm in this elective?
Great question. I really have enjoyed my applied security analysis class. Sounds technical. It's really not. It's essentially the Warren Buffett investing class. How do you find great companies? And Joe Andrasco and Will Snelling, the two professors, which is kind of a rare instance at Darden, have done a fantastic job curating the class with guest speakers, as well as just really interesting cases. That's one that I would recommend for first years or prospective students to take once they're at Darden. And it's been a really enjoyable class. On the sustainability side of things, I've also enjoyed or did enjoy Jim Naughton's class on sustainable reporting, um, which is an accounting class, but I can't remember if we ever used accounting in that class because it's really about how do companies portray their sustainable goals and any type of messaging that needs to go out to investors, customers, reporting agencies like the SEC. How do you frame these disclosures in order to meet your strategy, check the boxes, and what's the motivation there? And how do you evaluate what companies are saying versus what they're actually doing? And I found that to be really interesting in a case method discussion when you have variant perspectives on the companies. Something like Tesla, is it sustainable or not? We had a 70-minute conversation about it, and we're all able to form our own opinion.
Yeah, we had Jim on an office hours conversation talking about that very thing, and it's interesting. A lot of conversation about ESG these days and investing, but it's not necessarily the most regulated end of the disclosures. There's a lot of flexibility that companies have, maybe not necessarily a ton of consensus about what some of these things may exactly mean. And so it probably does make for a really interesting conversation as like you look at one of these companies, they're saying that they're sustainable, they do all this kind of stuff, but are they really? Or you should just take them at their word on that. Should you make an investment decision based on that? I would think that would have some very interesting conversation.
It certainly does. And it goes across industries as well. It's not just oil and gas or renewable energy that have to be concerned about their reporting from a sustainability perspective. We've seen a very, very rapid growth in the amount of reporting that companies are doing. And something that came up quite a good bit is the first mover advantage. Is it an advantage or a disadvantage to be the first one to say you're net zero? So it's fascinating. I'm really interested to see where that goes, particularly in the United States, over the next 10 years or so. I know Europe is maybe a few years ahead in terms of their actual structures behind this. And it could be a time where maybe the United States is not the first mover or leader in space that's finance or technology related. So it's a really fascinating space to be able to explore deeply with a global student body as well.
Well, you mentioned being involved with the Energy Club. Are there other clubs and organizations that you would want to mention here, or things that you've been enjoying doing outside of class?
Yeah, I would definitely plug Net Impact. That has helped us plan the sustainability conference. They provide a great platform for students to discuss broad sustainability. And this goes beyond carbon. I think it goes into workforce and governance and social impact. So they have a really great team and have put together a lot of great programming throughout the year that I find very interesting as I want to be as beneficial to my communities as possible. I mentioned the golf club. I'll always support them and their endeavors. And then just broadly, the Darden Students Association does a fantastic job at keeping us engaged and making sure that we have the platform to grow as individuals and grow as a community. All of the events that they put on, from resilience initiatives to cold calls on Thursday evenings, or the holiday events like Halloween party and Christmas parties. They do a great job at making sure that we're all engaged with the community and really growing as individuals.
Well, Andrew, last question for you here. What's a piece of advice you would share with our prospective student listeners, something that you would encourage them to think about as they consider their own MBA journeys?
Yeah, I think my biggest piece of advice as you're making decisions on business schools, visit. No matter what school it is, go and talk to the students at their campus, at their grounds. to be able to understand what a day in a life is for their students, and also just get the most genuine perspective on how they live their lives and how they treat each other. That was really the difference maker for me when I came to visit Darden. I think I actually came 3 or 4 times between my undergrad and starting. But I think that was what really pushed me over the edge to commit and come to Darden, because I got to see how everyone was treated and that they were just really interested in me as a person and the success that I'd have in the future. But I think making sure that you feel that wherever you go is important, and you'll really only get that if you see it in person.
Well, Andrew, thank you so much for your time. And like I said at the very beginning, best of luck with the Sustainability Conference. I know that it's going to be a great event. And it's conference season, so to speak, here at Darden. There's a lot of things happening. We just this past weekend just had the Diversity Conference and the Women's Symposium and all kinds of other student-led initiatives taking place over the next few weeks and months.
It sure is, Brett. I appreciate you having me on. It's all about managing the demands, right?
And that was my conversation with Andrew Yowell, a second-year student in our full-time MBA class of 2025. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at Darden, that's DARDEN, @virginia.edu. Until next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.